Ready? I'm ready. Okay, we will call the special Board of Finance meeting to order at 7 o'clock. Can I have the roll call, please?
We have all members present.
Thank you. Item number 2, old business. 2A, discussion and possible action on fiscal year 23-24 budget. Okay, so after hearing everyone's presentations and many meetings and reading of the budgets and so on and so forth, we have come to this point. This is when things get fun, or not.
Mr. Chairman, I have an information question.
Sure.
On the letter that we received from the Norwich, changing the designation for high schools. There was just a sentence in there that said they don't have to pay for the magnet school transportation. I'm just wondering if that's because they don't have a high school? Or is it?
I don't know. May I respond?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know why. Are you asking me why Norwich Public Schools doesn't have to pay for magnet school transportation? I can't answer that off the top of your.
Public schools do not have to provide transportation for magnet schools.
Yeah.
That used to be where there was a grant available that if you chose to, you could apply for reimbursement of the grant, but that's no longer the case. Previously working in Norwich, we did allow them to go, but they normally set up a stop and parents commuted to, did the commuting together.
So is that our choice that we pay for transportation?
We have a bus that goes down to Norwich. It just so happens to work with an existing bus that goes to Norwich Tech. So we have created a hub at one of their middle schools where they pick up the students and they're able to drop the students off. So if you're asking about our transportation,
Yeah, and you're
gonna pay, I mean, and with Norwich Public Schools, that's our arrangement.
in your contract for transportation for magnet schools is quite a bit.
I think there's two separate things.
Right.
We have a partnership with Norwich Public Schools. That's a contract that was executed by the Board of Ed, I believe in 2019. And part of that contract is that because we have a bus that goes to Norwich to bring students to Norwich Tech, we can pick up Norwich students and bring them to Griswold High School and then return them home. So that's part of our existing bus contract. It's no extra cost to us because we have a bus there and they're. In terms of the magnet school arrangement that Mrs. Martin just addressed, that's with Norwich Public Schools and their magnet school transportation decision. That doesn't impact us.
So we don't transport to magnet schools.
We do not.
Okay.
Norwich Tech is not a magnet school.
Right. Okay. Back on track here. So I guess let's start the discussions. Hopefully we can have some good discussion tonight and come to a conclusion on what we'd like to see for these budgets. Would anyone wish to start the conversation off, or I can? It's up to you guys.
I'd like to say something.
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
In reviewing the budgets, which I know we'll be addressing later, and our reserve amounts, which we may or may not use. I truly believe, and and I'll hold firm on this, that we should not have any mill increase for the residents of for the taxpayers of Brisbane this year.
Thank you, Gail. I couldn't agree with you more. I think now it's going to take some work to get there, but I think we need to end up, and I'm totally firm as well, that we have a 0%, or excuse me, 0 mill rate increase. So no zero increase to the taxes. That's where I'm at. For a litany of reasons. Number one, I think we had very favorable increase last year to the grand list, which is excellent. Number two, this is kind of the last year, and I think you brought it up last meeting. This is kind of a year to hold the line because, and I think I brought it up too. Hopefully, a year from now, we will have infrastructure in the ground, or at least seriously along the way, and therefore, this is the last year we really need to hold the line and say, this is what we can do for you, and let's pray that the infrastructure brings in business, which in turn brings in tax revenue. That being said, our reserve balance is to a point where if I think, and again, we'll discuss the budgets at length, but if we raise taxes at this point, I think we're overtaxing our citizens, which is a complete misjustice. So I'm with Gail to start the conversation off. Would anyone else like to piggyback off that?
So
Go ahead.
I'll say my thoughts. I'm in full agreement that we should try our best to not have a tax increase this year. However, it can't impact next year and make next year's budget go up by, if this year was going to go up 5%, if next year can't go up by 7% because we took it out of reserves or cut capital or made some cuts that need to be in the budget. I think wherever we're going to find that zero needs to not impact next year and future years.
Agree. That would certainly be ideal. Absolutely. Scott, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, just just a very broad overview. We're all taxpayers here. I think we all dislike having to pay taxes just as much as the next person. So when they go up, it certainly, I think, hurts everyone. I'd like to hold the line as much as possible. However, there comes a point where you can only hold it so much and what's feasible, because at some point there's a catch up. To Dan's point, I am not in favor of utilizing surplus as a means to balance the budget and artificially cut taxes because the following year it comes back to haunt us. We're extremely fortunate this year that didn't, and there were some unique circumstances that kind of that led to that. I don't know if I necessarily agree that we're overtaxing our citizens every year. These departments, they put forward an honest budget that we vet accordingly. I believe that our surplus is what it is based on prudent spending. Revenues, us having the good fortune of having, revenues come in higher than anticipated. Some of it was as a result of the real estate market with reval. And the tuition side of the house where, we've been fortunate that for the last few years, it has exceeded, expectations and what was planned for revenue. And I think that's really what's responsible for the lion's share of our balance, our balance there. It's not necessarily that we're overtaxing. I agree. We need to find that happy medium to try to meet the best of both worlds. We have a difficult job in that we can't fulfill everybody's want and need because we've got to balance the needs against the ability to pay. That's where kind of I sit.
Okay. Gary, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with Gail and you on the 0% increase. I don't have an issue with using some of the fund balance as we did last year. I do agree that we're gonna have to make some cuts to off balance that. I don't think the whole thing should come out of that. But I do think that we have them. Myself, I think we have all the taxpayers. It's time for them to get their.
I agree. Go on one side note I just thought of, do we have any update on the, because this directly affects our reserve account, do we have any update on the grant for the senior center?
Dana talked to Ryan today.
Yeah, I talked to Ryan this morning. He's got the last of the information. He's starting to send it around. I think he needs 6 or 7 signatures on it, but he thought by Friday it would be to finance.
Great,
And we should hear next week.
thank you. Okay, Tom, do you have any
And
thoughts?
you are so calm and accepting of that, because last week he told you the same thing, that it would be Friday, so kudos to you, you've been really patient.
Well, he did mention that he had a lot on his plate last week. He was gonna aim for Friday, but good for him that he called me this morning because he initiated that call. So I feel pretty confident he's trying to wrap this up for us.
Great, great.
So on Friday, it doesn't happen.
Well, I know his phone number. And he answers the phone. So we just keep checking with him. Can you get first?
Real quick, do we have any idea ballpark what that would do to our reserve fund, or is it impossible to say?
If it all went back.
Yeah. Well, would it all go?
Well, no, it
No,
wouldn't
no.
all go back,
Right,
but ballpark, I think somewhere around what was appropriated may go back, but I don't have the. final
okay,
numbers.
okay, so okay. That's quite a bit, wow.
I had in my notes, and it could be incorrect, that about 700,000 would go back, the equivalent of 1 mil.
Somewhere around
close
there.
To 1 mil.
Well, 1 mil used to be. Now
At the time.
it's about 960,000.
Oh, okay, 3/4.
Yeah, that's,
Increase our unassigned by about almost 1.5%.
yeah, that would be, wow. Okay, Tom, what do you say?
I would like to see the mill rate being held at where it is, but according to the spreadsheet we have, that would mean we would have to cut $1.341 million. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
Correct, yeah, well. Yes and no, we'd have to. That assumes we don't use anything out of the fund balance, but yes, in order for, as it sits currently, we would have to cut that much, yes. But again, I think we're in a very good position to do a combination of the both. That would be ideal, at least in my mind. Cut some and use the reserves for another portion.
What do you feel comfortable in the amount to use from reserves?
Well, I'm comfortable with a pretty healthy amount being used. The thing is, we don't actually, knock on wood, we get that grant, that's another 700,000. I mean, at that point, I don't think there should be any question that we need to spend. Now, what do we spend it on? What do we use it on? Of course, is the question, but, I mean, to my point earlier, for what it's worth, this policy, we're way above it and we're only gonna get higher above it, so.
Is the grant you're referring to the 1.2 million?
Yeah.
7,000 would be the portion,
Right,
or go back into the general fund.
right, correct, yep. Val. Last but not least,
General reserve, that's one time paying something, right? It's not actually.
well, that would be the idea, yeah, the reason why you don't want to spend, let's just say, oh, we'll put $1 million towards the budget because.
No, I know. 'cause
That's $1
we're gonna
million
get it
next year
it's not gonna
of
cost.
revenue that we wouldn't have, correct?
But there are no firm policies on how we can use that money, correct? It's just the best way to use it.
Not to my knowledge, right?
Right.
I think it's for us to use, so.
Okay. I definitely would like to flat fund it. I know the reeval. One of the things with the reevals coming this past year or two is the taxpayers a lot of taxpayers got really hit hard with taxes. And I know
Yeah.
not everyone did, but most of the people, their taxes went up significantly with that reeval.
Mhm.
But on the other hand, our taxpayers keep voting on these projects and they know we're gonna have to pay for them eventually. I'd hate to see a budget devastated because we can't pay for what the taxpayers have voted on. Did we get an answer from Todd if we moved money to took some of that reserve money towards fixing the roads? Is that something his department can do?
Yeah, he's looking into exactly how much he could, but like with the million, he said that would be, they wouldn't have any issue with that
Okay, that's good.
And that's what's in the budget now.
in the capital budget.
My same question, Mr. Chairman, is still that, the superintendent said that they had put in a grant for the 119,000 for the ballots, in the capital improvement. So I'm thinking that that can be taken out.
I don't think we have any
Well,
approval of that
Yeah,
grant yet.
I would hope, I would pump the brakes on that, is there any update on that, Sean, or no?
That we were just talking about.
Yeah, I followed up after our facilities meeting tonight, and we should have an answer by the end of June. They extended the application date to May 28th, so they've extended also the return and the response date.
I don't want to put,
Discussion in May, things are in June.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but is it likely, unlikely?
So.
Hard to
this is a
say.
Security
I
grant,
know.
we received funding for the first 3 rounds and we tend to, I'm hoping we always go for it. The
Of
last round, the 4th round, we didn't get it.
Yeah.
We applied and our application that we spent that before, right after, before break.
We submitted it prior to the original application date, just so that we had it in time.
Yeah.
But now, of course, after they extended it, now we're waiting legally for a
Yeah.
response and not getting it. But we're hopeful.
We have gotten money in the past, though, on things?
We have.
Okay. Okay, so now everyone, we're all more or less on the same page, I would say. I don't think anyone's really totally opposite of anyone. So now I think it's time to go budget by budget, not and look at it and say what do we expect them to do, because we need to give them guidance on what the next step is for sure. So
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
Could I make a suggestion?
absolutely.
The sheet that Eric gave us.
Yes.
Shows that if we want a 0 increase, that we have to cut the budget by 1,341,000. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And from the other sheet he gave us, we're over our maximum for the policy by 531,560.
Mhm.
So my question is, perhaps as we go forward, not knowing how much we're going to cut or not cut, perhaps we can all agree that we're going to contribute 531,569 from the unassigned fund balance, bring it down to the maximum per policy, and then look at the remainder of the cuts in the budget itself.
I'm very amenable to that idea.
I mean, everybody has their way of figuring.
Yeah, of course, right, absolutely. There's
Again, that's projected numbers, so that could change.
yeah,
But it's not gonna change by hundreds of thousands.
It should.
no. Tom, go ahead.
We had talked about there being some initial payments for the field project. And instead of bonding those, was there some discussion about taking some money out of the general fund for those initial payments?
Eric, if
And
you-
how much was that?
well, I believe what we did is we are using our general fund to fund it currently, and then once we bond it, it'll just replenish it. We have to make
Oh,
this,
would replenish it?
Yeah, it would-
Finish it in August,
It's just a-
probably when we.
so there's not a timing issue there, really, no.
No. I
So,
mean, we'll have a negative fund balance as of June 30th
But-
in that field project,
Yeah,
but it'll be
right.
recouped in August when we sell the bond.
And what that did is it allowed us to essentially not pay, put a payment on it this year. So all we do is one interest payment. So I think it's that was a no brainer. Go, Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, but Tom, to your point, we did talk about possibly appropriating 500 or 600,000 out of surplus when it came time to bond that to lower the cost of that bond. So that would be something else, I guess, for us to
Consider, sure.
consider
Yeah.
when we're looking at what we're gonna take out of surplus.
Okay, so that was a. different-
That wasn't, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think Dan and Scott had talked about that.
Now, that was a separate, that's not gonna affect the mill rate on the budgets.
No, because all that would be doing is we'd be bonding less in the
Less
future.
for the
Lower debt
future.
service.
So let's say we took
So
five,
it's not gonna
right.
help our situation that we're talking about.
Not this year, but long term.
Long term.
Right,
No, I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just making sure we're.
right. That would be a.
still Gotta figure out this.
Agreed, no, totally, but I think we need to look holistically, not just for this year, but, for the years down the road, and if we can. We have a good reserve, if we can buy something perhaps this year that would have been in the budget next year or something like that, we need to get creative, so I think,
I just wanted to clarify.
yeah, absolutely.
Mr.
And
Chair.
Val, to your question too,
Sorry.
not knowing how much we will get when the senior citizen grant comes in,
That's huge, yeah.
we may replenish far less
Right.
to the athletic field portion. And we may end up over our maximum per policy in our reserves again
Right,
when that all settles out, but we don't have a crystal ball because
know.
we've got to do this budget by May. And all this other stuff is happening probably after May.
right. Dan, go.
I
ahead.
would
Yeah,
just,
absolutely.
so, I agree with what everyone's saying. I agree with Gail, maybe we start with the undesignated fund balance and how much we want to earmark. I think that'll give us a roadmap to where we need to get to. The only thing I'd say is let's just say we were gonna take and hit all that money to capital, right? And capital is 1.506 million in the budget. We just need to be careful that, next year, the budget as it sits right now is 40,572,000, right? So if we artificially deflate that by taking from undesignated fund balance to get to our minimum per policy, which is 17.5,
I agree.
that's 17.5 next year on 40,572,000, $7.1 million that we should have in an undesignated fund balance. So I just want everyone to kind of be thinking about that if we want to be at 17.5. Not saying that's where we need to be.
Right, that's the key, yeah,
Well, it's a delicate balancing.
Mhm.
certainly. Okay, so,
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead, no, absolutely, I'm just thinking.
Can you just give us exactly what each budget is, money wise, gold, capital, and
Dollar wise,
or percentage wise, either way, or both?
all right, school is $31,114,601. That's 4.9%.
And that's what percentage of the entire budget?
Could you repeat the number, please?
I got it.
31,114,601.
I did that. It's about 76% of the budget,
Oh,
but I'd let the finance guy check my number.
That sounds about right to me.
76%.
And it represents what percentage?
76.
All right, and the town,
76?
and the town budget,
17. That includes capital though. And then my math.
The overall town budget is $9,457,620.
Well, that's with debt service.
Yeah, that's with debt service and
Yeah,
capital.
so can we look at it without the debt service?
yeah,
17.
That's 23.31%. Without debt service, it's $7,135,149. And that would be 17.59%
17.59% over
of the
last year?
budget.
Oh, of the budget.
Yeah.
of the whole budget.
I looked at that service, just if anyone was interested in my number, then take it to the bank, but it's, that service is about 6% of the budget and capital is about 4%.
Oh, thank you. That's my next question.
And capital improvements is in that.
4% of the
Yes.
budget.
Okay.
But the 17% number includes capital for the town government.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
if I may, I'm
sure.
I'm just gonna jump in with both feet
Let's do it. Yeah, I'd like to.
and
I'd like to.
take my looks as we go here. You know, for the last 2 years, my opinion is that the general government budget has really been kind of decimated. There were meetings where we had conversations with departments on how many postage stamps do you think you're going to use this year? You know, figuratively, like counting paper clips and erasers. They have for the last 2 years been the kind of the go-to budget on cuts. On the opposite side, for the last 2 years, at least the least recent, there were no cuts made to the Board of Ed budget. Last year, the cut was extremely small, at best, so I am not necessarily in full favor of trying to continue to pare down and decimate the general government budget. You know, when I first started on the board for a number of years, capital was kind of the go-to, and I've come around to, you know, a different way of thinking that, you know, you keep kicking the can down the road and things don't get any better. They just get a heck of a lot more expensive, and we have the same, if not worse, problems. So there's a balance. So my off the cuff, and I don't have the full amount, but my off the cuff is to reduce the increase of the Board of Education budget from 4.9% to 2.45%, which is a cut of like a little over $727,000. So that is also then on the contrary, that is still an increase in their budget of $727,000 or an increase of 2.45%.
Not to cut you off, but that's essentially you're cutting it in half.
Exactly, exactly. You know, sorry, Jim, but there is going to be a slight cut to capital, and whether or not we can figure out what we want to do with that on the surplus side. But I'd say let's look at, you know, $200,000 in capital. So that puts us at, you know, 927. Do I think that there might be some areas in the general government budget that we can look at? Yeah, sure. We had our eyes opened, I think, a few times as we were listening to some of the presentations. One of the things, or two of the things though, that I do feel kind of strongly on, and I'm going in the opposite direction, is keeping that, I think it was $2,000 for the assessor, for that part-time to help clear that backlog so that we can get those properties truly on the logs and that people are paying their full value. The other one that I would certainly like to revisit would be emergency services and recruitment and retainage. To me, something just didn't add up when you had a department that had 400 calls for service and had, I think, 19 guys, and you had another department that had, I think, 38 guys with 600 calls for service, and their recruitment and retention was less. Yet we were told that the payments, the way that they paid and what they paid was identical. The numbers just don't add up. So I would like to take a look at that perhaps, and we certainly have the $1,200 that we could reduce. I think it was physicals from, and add it to that recruitment and retention. Perhaps we need to rebalance what that line item is for Griswold and reallocate some of that towards Jewett City, because it doesn't really seem like they are truly getting the same amount in recruitment and retention, you know, at the end of the day. That's about as far as as far as I'm willing to go at this point. I was not looking at a 0% increase. I was, looking somewhere around the $500,000 mark. But certainly if we were to supplant some of those additional cuts or funding of some one-time capital through surplus, we could certainly get down there from there.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Anyone else wish to go? Yeah.
I totally agree with the $2,000 for the assessors. There's very few line items that we ever come across year to year that are a direct impact on people being added to the tax rolls
Right.
for what they should be added to the tax roll for. They built a house or enlarged a house or whatever. So I think that's a no-brainer. I agree with the cut to the Board of Ed. I'm not certain. The cut that you're talking about, Scott, represents how many dollars?
I just took their increase, I cut it in half. So their increase was 1.454,425. So I just made it 727, 212.
So that's like a 700,000 and change.
It would be a $727,000.
Seven.
Yeah.
So if we look again at bringing our unassigned fund balance in line by contributing 531,000 to the overage that we are looking at, we are only looking at another
200 something.
well, 700 and change. But not all of that has to come from the Board of Ed. So I mean, it does create an outline of sort of a reasonable approach. I would be in favor of a cut to the Board of Ed, but probably for no more than 600,000.
Go ahead, Gary.
This seems to be, the 500-something thousand that, Gail mentioned, we started with 600,000 last year, we got it all back, we may be able to get even more back this year with, the senior center reimbursement, so I don't have a problem with going over that 551,500 to reduce the mill rate. I'll agree with Scott on the Board of Education cut. I'm sure that if there is some, I already mentioned something that can come out of the capital improvement budget. I won't support any big cuts in the town government because I think we've cut them too much over the past couple of years. So if anything gets cut there, I would want to know exactly what we would lose.
I'm gonna shake things up a bit and say, I wouldn't blink an eye at spending $1 million out of the surplus, to be honest with you. I think it's, again, we have to parse down what that's on, but I think it's the time to do it, and knock on wood, if we get that 700,000 more for the senior center, I mean, it's, we at some point, we're obligated to spend this money because it's, again, it's, how can we possibly raise taxes when we have such a flush fund that is the taxpayers' money at the end of the day? Does anyone else want to?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Dan.
I agree with you, Alex. I think I would be inclined as to go so high as $1 million out of surplus if it was dedicated to the right thing, right? So capital improvement, I think there's some areas in capital improvement where we could make some cuts and be close to funding capital with that $1 million. And to your point about the grant coming back, the 700 and change for the school, just looking back at their budget, the salaries alone, the increases were 667, health insurance was 278, and the retirement fund is 15 grand. So, I mean, I guess if we went back to the Board of Ed and said, you're gonna have to cut 700 and change, we know where that's probably going to come from. I can't speak for them, but I mean, there's not a lot of transportation costs of 363, and the rest of the 1.45 million is nickel dime compared to those line items I just mentioned, so. I guess what I'm saying is, I think, I think I would be able to guess pretty good at where the cuts would have to come from. If we would have told them to lower by 7 cents, it would change. So I'm a little bit scared about that.
Yeah, I'm totally uncomfortable as well, but. I certainly get Scott's sentiment. I mean, it's. At what point are we not doing our due diligence as a board if we just continue to pass budgets when they're presented to us and we don't?
Mr. Chairman, $1 million from the fund balance would have to be recouped or being added to the next budget.
Not necessarily, no,
That's
not
where you
necessarily,
spend
it depends,
Because
right?
we
Right.
spend it. So
Right.
if we put it in capital.
One
just to
time.
clarify me, if we use that for the capital budget, then we will take that 4% out of the budget that we don't have to charge it. So it'll go down 4%.
Well, that would be assuming we literally just fund the entire capital with it, but that wouldn't be wise because then next year.
Yeah, knowing capital couldn't come back next year at 1.5 million.
Right, because let's say we funded this year $1 million, then next year they're starting is $1 million, so we'd already be raising the budget $1 million without doing anything. Now, we got lucky this year because essentially we basically did do that last year. We funded at 600,000 and but again, I mean, even in these pretty bad on economic times, uncertain at least. I mean, the town is gonna come in under budget and our grand list increased, and so.
But to Gary's point, so we take $1 million out of it and put it somewhere, is it gonna help the budget for next year? It
Oh,
may
absolutely.
give us tax relief this year, but how do we do it without killing the budget for next year?
Exactly.
Well, there's certainly ways
That's what I'm asking. What is the best way to do that?
I mean, Mr. Chairman, it's not gonna be a painless budget, and I don't think that it should be just shared on certain costs. I mean, the Board of Education is the largest part of our budget.
Oh, no
I
doubt.
mean, we haven't cut it at all, and I'm not anti-education. I've been on the Board of Education in other towns. I'm pro-education, but we have not taken anything off the Board of Education budget last
Yeah.
year.
I agree.
So I just want a clarification.
Sure.
When you're talking about that $1 million.
Yes,
Are you talking about the budget that we're working with plus the 300,000 to 600,000 for the field complex that we've sort of committed to 6 months from now? Or is that field complex what we've committed to that in addition to the $1 million?
so you're saying, let's say is your suggestion use what we have above the maximum currently to fund towards a field project? Is that what?
I'm saying use what we have above the maximum now for this budget.
Right,
And then revisit it for the field project
Okay.
when we
You know what the
are.
grants are coming in and then.
I mean, again, it's $1 million is it's just a number, but at the same time, I'm saying whatever we need to spend it on capital. Long-term projects, whatever we figure out how to spend it on, I'm saying. I wouldn't blink an eye at spending that out of the reserve fund, to be honest.
And
Basically, real quick, what I'm saying is I want to go above what you're saying, Gail. You said 500,000, give or take. I want to go above that, to be honest with you. Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess. The million, my take on it is, I don't want to be stuck at being at the maximum for policy, whether that's 17.5, right? The
Right.
minimum was 8.5. I think that might be a little low.
Yes,
So, if that's gonna deflate the percentage, so be it. So if we're right smack dab in the middle of our minimum and maximum, then I'm fine with that for undesignated fund balance.
I agree. And again, this year's numbers, but our minimum for the town policy, and you can think about that what you would. We are $3.7 million above the minimum, right? So, and that doesn't account for, again, the senior center money, so,
Mr. Chairman?
yeah, absolutely,
I have a couple questions for the superintendent.
sure.
In going through the Board of Ed budget, the special ed administration was responsible for 38% of the increase. Can you tell me what the special ed administration, can you refresh my memory? Is that just the administration, the people who administer, like the salaries? Are we adding another highly paid professional in that department? And I guess I have the same question for the central office administration, central office annuity. I'm sorry, I forgot what you said the central office annuity was, but that represents 28% of the increase.
Do you have a page reference, Gail, or do you want me to just talk?
Is that page 81?
No, I did these calculations, myself and Scott went through the calculations a while ago.
Central office, those were increased because we attracted new
I'm
talent.
sorry, speak
The
loud.
central office annuities, we increased, we attracted new talent to the district, and we tried to get some of the overall packages in line and consistent with other like districts. So there was an increase to that.
So that's over and above what you negotiated through union contracts? Salary contracts? Is that over and above what you've negotiated?
I'd have to look at it.
Union and
I'd
salary
have to look
contracts.
at it totally. I can't list that.
What did you mean by new talent?
So we had some absences from central office and exits, and we actually, we had to fill those positions. And it's a competitive job market, and to get the appropriate people in the appropriate spots, the salaries and the overall packages had to come up. So there were increases in those lines.
So that's what the central office annuity is.
Yes.
And that represented what in dollars?
Joe? If you give me a minute, I can pull it up on my.
So just a quick question, is this discussion on, and the school budget on page 81, is that what we're talking?
That's what I'm looking at, yes. I believe
Okay.
so.
So I think you're talking, Gail, the 30,000 for the two, for this, for the previous year, 30,500, it went up to 39,200. And that's 81,
Yeah,
which I believe you're referring to.
I think so too.
And that's,
So it went from
30,500 to 39,200.
Is that sort of the same thing as the increase in the special ed administration?
The special education administration, we're trying to migrate some of that. We took 2 PPT coordinators that were in the operating budget. And we took some money from our ESSER to backfill this, we have 2 administrators. One is fully funded by the existing budget. To support the new administrator that helps out, we got rid of the 2 PPT coordinators, and then we had to use some grant money, and we're trying to use more money from, less money from the grants.
Try to reduce the cliff that otherwise will happen next year to fully bring that person into a general fund.
So,
So what's the dollar?
That's
So I have to
about,
go to the central,
that was about 50.
so those are previously paid by grants and now they're gonna be paid in-house.
Only right now, that's 50% of the person. People that are coming in.
So there'll be another adjustment next year.
We would have to do something similar. Mhm.
Gail, that's on page 67.
67, thanks. So that went from 251,000 to 295.
No, I think, yes, the overall, because there was an increase that we just explained, on line 122.
Okay, yeah.
So that went from 147 to 203, 962.
So is that an additional person or an additional half person?
It's an additional person that we eliminated 2 PPT coordinators to get to partially fund this person. And the other 50% is coming out of grants. So it's 0.5 FTE. If you look below on 122, we explain it on the notes bottom.
So the admin salary, that's for how many people?
That's
That's
2
203. That's 2 people
on 122.
on 120.
Well, 1.5, right?
1.5, right? 5%, yeah, 0.5 is in grants still.
So that's a delta of about $56,000.
Yes, approximately.
So have you got any update from the state on ECS funding or?
I think I'm gonna defer to Eric. The legislation, I think, they countered what the governor proposed.
Right.
And the information I had was in that proposal to go through many approval
Of course.
processes. What I read is our ECS funding was restored to the level of this year.
Okay,
Yeah, the appropriations committee put out their budget. From what I read, they said they're gonna hold towns harmless.
good,
But now it comes to negotiations
Right.
between them and the governor, so
right.
who knows?
So
Well-
fortunately, we've heard the same thing, but there's been more since.
Right,
Yeah, I haven't seen actual town by town runs on it, but
right.
from what they're saying, they're holding harmless. But again, that's just their budget. Lamont's got his budget. They
Yeah,
have to negotiate what they're gonna do.
That would give us more, how much more revenue?
About 49,000, I think got cut.
Well, that would be good, maybe a little bit else. Okay, anyone else, next? Any other comments?
So, yeah,
Yep.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So that was grant money, the extra 1.5%, the 56,000 that you don't have any longer, correct?
What was, I'm sorry.
So on the 122,
You're talking about the special ed. correct?
yeah,
If I'm wrong.
that's because of the grant, change in grant.
Yes, we're trying to fund more money in the budget.
I
so
like
we
it,
don't-
so don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Now on page 81, the 120, is that's like the 50,000 increase too? Is that the same idea that's happening, grant money?
Well, there's the athletic director. There was an increase with that. That's in the collective bargaining unit. We did have a position in our business department that went vacant, and we came up with a salary to fill that position. As well as there were increases to all the different positions. That's where we are at this point in time, but that line remains to be seen.
So are those increases about the same, like
3%.
2.5%, 3%?
So 120 is currently listed as the superintendent, the curriculum director, business manager, athletic director.
That's correct.
Did you say something about?
The athletic director, I just wanted to be clear, is in a collective bargaining unit contract where myself, Mr. Lavoisier, and Ms. Martin have individual contracts for that.
Gotcha.
So they're individual, they're not union contracts.
We are not unionized.
I see. Individual.
Now, line 130, secretaries, it looks like it's adding, one full-time executive assistant to the superintendent. Were there other secretaries or
Yeah,
assistants?
we have, that includes payroll clerk as well as a confidential financial assistant, and we did go up on, we had to increase the salary for the confidential financial assistant. That was something that went vacant prior to Thanksgiving. And there's been more work in human resources in the business department, so we had to add a stipend to the payroll clerk to accomplish some of those tasks.
So that's not a new position, it's just,
There
New
are existing positions
Got
that
So there wasn't an addition of a portion of a person?
there's still 3 in that department. So it's Deb, it's and her 2 employees. That also includes Mrs. Drobiak, who works under me.
Anything else for the superintendent at the moment?
So that 49,000 increase, part of that is due to the addition of a business director that you didn't have last year.
So we did have a business director last year when we did a study of like districts in the region as well as in the state. The Board of Education and I felt that that position was grossly underfunded, so we wanted to get it in line with similar districts, and so there was an increase to that position.
so these are all raises that have already been given, they just, now you're catching up in the new budget to fund it.
You could say that.
Okay.
Do you think, Sean, do you think the Norber's decision is gonna impact our I know it's hard, I don't want to put you on the spot, but it certainly can't hurt, I don't think, right?
Can't
So-
hurt, it's hard to predict. I will say, and I said this the other night, we have 33 students exiting in the senior class, and we have already secured 33 new students for next year.
Excellent,
That has not happened in the past.
great.
At this time of the year, the trend is we hope that it goes up.
Right, thank you. So typically they're not really signing up that heavily yet.
We have a lot of students in our registration queue, but they have not confirmed.
Got it.
And so I'm hesitant to.
Yeah, understood.
Your crystal ball isn't working tonight.
What's that?
Your crystal ball isn't working.
No, not.
Okay, how does everyone else feel about the Board of Ed? In general, Dan, I tend to agree with you, I just don't know, I don't just,
I guess, Alex. We should ask. Them if we were to cut that 700 and how much was it, Scott?
727, 212.
And I think maybe we asked the Board of Ed, they're here tonight, where would those cuts most likely come from? So we know what it means for the budget.
Well, I don't know if we have to ask 727 if we're gonna increase something from the fund balance. I mean, 551 was part of that.
Well, I mean, the number was thrown out, a 727 cut to the Board of Ed, so I just would like to understand what the Board of Ed, we have no line item control over their budget.
Right.
If we're gonna throw a number at them that they can come back with us to say, all right, here's our budget, here's what we cut, I'd like to know what that means before I make a decision.
Well, a number of 600,000 was also thrown. I think we put up 600,000. So I was looking at some numbers and saying. People are looking at $1 million from the general fund, 500,000 from the general fund. And I took the 600,000 for the school. So if we take 600,000 from the school and we're trying to make a total cuts of 1.341 million. That would mean we would take 741,000 from the general fund, which is right between 500,000 and a million. And then with that, so 741,000 from the general fund, 600,000 from the school budget, that's total reduction of 1,341, which according to our sheet here, gives us a 0 mill increase.
That sounds.
So I think asking, I would prefer to ask the school
Six
system,
hundred, what's 600?
what 600.
I agree with that.
Gail, what did you say?
I just wanted to, on the earlier, on Dan's comment, ask the Board of Ed what would be cut. A devil's advocate position is that we sort of already know what they're gonna say because they've already baked in all these large increases for salaries of people at the top. So, you know, if we had more of a balance of dollars going directly to the students versus salaries for administration, I feel better about sort of trying to reduce the cut. But I've seen a lot of increases on salaries at the top, and I know you need to keep good talent, but you know, our taxpayers, you know, they're blue collar workers and they have a real hard time making ends meet. And they're not getting these kinds of wage increases. So I just feel that there's a balance that needs to be struck, and I'm concerned that maybe when we were looking the other way, it's out of balance.
Okay, Dan, you want me to, you want me to?
So, yeah, I mean, to play devil's advocate to devil's advocate, we heard 3% increase from, we played we heard a 3% increase.
Yeah.
I think if we're gonna go down that road of what is an acceptable percentage increase, then we need to open the town government budget and look at some of those 11% increases that are in there.
Yeah, I certainly agree.
Okay. I like Tom's suggestion.
I do too.
I do too. The only issue is, even though let's say we take money from the reserve fund, it's again, in doing what he suggested and what others have suggested, that all we would be doing is plugging the budget. So again, it's would it not be creating a cliff in a sense? So I guess I'll have to ask, I mean, it's impossible to put you guys on the spot, but if we were to come to you with a $600,000 increase, what would that look like? Sorry. Well, actually, no, it is a $600,000 increase. $600,000 decrease to your increase. Does that make sense? You guys understand what
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Just to pay on one side, because I've been on the board. I mean, the superintendent can say what he thinks he would do, but it is up to the board to decide
Certainly.
what they would do, how many members, they will decide on what to cut. So asking the superintendent right now, I don't know, that will give you an accurate description of exactly what the final number will be from the members of the Board of Education.
Well,
I think he's
we can
gonna
ask
have
Mary,
it.
we can ask Mary Beth, who's the,
She's one board person.
I would just say in years past, we've always asked if we were to cut 500,000, what would that mean to the Board of Ed's budget? At least give them the courtesy of asking the question. We think we know.
Well, I
They
think,
haven't spoken yet.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be in stone, it's just what he's thinking.
I don't want to sit here acting like they're not sitting right in front of us. They're right here, let's ask them. It's silly.
so Mary Beth, what would you say to that?
Position. And possibly if we had to, we would have to start with cutting pre-K. We would start cutting athletics and we'd start cutting on music. But the biggest one is gonna be the positions, and that's going to impact the students.
I'm
greatly.
sorry.
And
Right.
we're gonna have to cut positions. We're probably looking at 6 to 8 positions, depending. That will impact our class sizes to our students. And if we can't get to that, then next will be pre-K, music, and athletics. And then the board does listen very carefully and take the recommendations of our administration, our superintendent and our business manager, as they're the expert. And we do listen to what they would come in with a cut.
How does everyone here feel about perhaps, which I think we've done in the past, a essentially tiered approach where we say a budget with $700,000 cut, 500,000, 250, etc.
Yeah, I think we've done that in the past, Alex. I think we've asked that this, if we cut this, what would it, where would you go to get it?
Right.
This much, where would you go to get it? This much, where would you go to get it?
I think that's the best approach. Mary Beth, go ahead.
We did, you asked us to do that last year. It started with, I believe, 65,000. Then it went up to a couple 100,000. It went up to, I don't know, 350, 400. And we brought that information in as our superintendent and the administration had to diligently work on that. And it just died right there. It's like, I don't know if you looked at it, if it wasn't considered, but we're happy to do whatever we have to do to bring information to you, but I want it to be not them using their time when they're to be doing other things in our district to do this task. I mean, we're going to definitely look at this and see where our cuts are gonna be, then we're happy to do it.
Yeah, I think that, I don't want to speak for everyone on the board, but I think we would like to see, where do you guys want to start? Well, Gail, go ahead.
No,
I think you've already stated your position.
Yeah.
I think you've already,
I would like, if we looked at alternate numbers, I'd like to look at cut 400, cut 600. That's about it.
okay. Anyone else?
It's fair.
You think so?
It's fair, yeah. To at least understand where the cuts would come from before we actually make the cut.
Okay, so,
I think we used that information last year and we said, okay, we're not gonna cut.
yeah, it's Mary Beth, I think it actually did its
It helped us.
purpose,
It did cut it.
because we said, wow, actually, on second thought.
This is gonna be drastic. We'll be losing 6, 7 staff members.
Yeah.
If we go that route, or we'll lose 4, increase, and then we have to go after our pre-K program, which is very devastating to us. We're trying to add in this new, the board did approve it last night, this new aspect to our pre-K and offer before and after school care for 4-year-olds in our pre-K, which is, we will be self-funded by itself, but that would be a devastation to the parents. And then you're looking at music and athletics as we're putting in a brand new field and 8-lane track. We're hoping as we move the old school to the senior center, that we're going to be able to take on more students, which is to 46,000, I believe, for all school students. That's a huge increase that will be coming back to the town for tuition more. Our RFP is posted, we're opening bids next week.
Scott?
I guess question for Sean and then I guess a question for Dana. Sean, do you have any projected retirements coming up this year?
We put 2 in there, and we've confirmed 2 at this point.
And I guess Dana, for you, I guess, so that everything's kind of on a level playing field, 400 and 600,000, whatever those percentages come out to be. I guess I'd be interested in what are you going to do if you were to cut your budget by that, and what's that going to mean to you? And I say that because in all fairness, we have going after general government as our first area of cut kind of year after year after year. And I'm not trying to downplay the importance of education, the education budget, not at all. We have a hard job. We have a hard job to get to a number that we want to get to, that we believe that the taxpayers are going to accept. And budget season, I hate to say it, but there's never any winners that come out of budget season. There's a hit. It's horrible, but that's a fact. So I mean, I guess I would just also like to know from you that start 0.5%, you can go to 1%, 1.5%, 2%, because you did ask, hey, if you're gonna make any cuts, we'd appreciate the courtesy if you'd say, just give us a number and we'll figure out where it's gonna go. So I'd be kind of interested in that, as well.
Scott, if I may, before you answer there, if I may, I just did the quick math. So 700 and 400 from the Board of Ed, and Board of Ed is 76% of the budget. We said the town is 17% of the budget.
Yeah.
Why don't we ask what would
Well,
119 and 68,000 be to the government budget?
Would operating budget for.
And you can touch
including
capital.
Capital or,
I included
Or debt
capital.
service.
okay,
I
so
include
how much
capital.
are you saying?
119 and 68,000, which is 17% of 700 and 400.
How much total?
I'd like to leave capital out of it, but we could,
Well, we could keep $119,000 for ballots. I keep coming back to this. It could be paid for, right? I mean, why are we not even looking at that?
go ahead.
To your point, I agree with you, Alex. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for general government specifically,
Right.
using that same.
Right.
I
using that
think
same
that's-
percentage scheme, just general government, not capital. We always treat capital as kind of a separate animal.
General government
So,
is
Right.
operating budget's 13.87% of the budget.
So, yeah, let's get someone to do the quick math on that, what approximately what. $75,000 around that ballpark.
I would not be in favor of cutting the general government by 70-some thousand dollars.
Are you just looking for a percentage to equal out with the Board of Education?
Yeah, well, we're trying to get apples to apples here.
Well, I mean, how can you do that? I mean, how is that possible?
Well, what do you mean?
I don't understand how you, the related, just to take a percentage when we already have cutting over the past years with the general government. They're pared down and just to cut a percentage to equal out with the Board of Education. We didn't cut the Board of Education anything last year.
So
So are you suggesting we pass the budget without cutting anything?
No,
It's
I
impossible.
didn't
Come
think
on.
that's that. I like
No, it's
Tom's
saying-
idea.
my question is for optics. We're going to get the optics on what it means to the Board of Education if we were to cut those numbers. So in all fairness, I would like to hear from the general government only side. What would it mean if it was
Well, I
similar?
could understand.
Just for illustration
Just really,
purposes.
not
Yes.
necessarily that we're gonna cut it, just to
Right, not to say
know.
that we are going to cut it,
this
but it's more for
information.
illustration purposes.
all information.
That's all.
Okay.
And in fairness to the Board of Ed, there were years that they got no increase.
Could we hear Tom's proposal again, please, so I
Sure.
can make some better notes, please?
Take 741,000 from the general fund,
Excuse me?
take 741,000 from the general fund. General fund.
Yeah.
And 600,000 cut to the school.
I mean, I would suggest,
Well, we gave them some information, look at it, bring it back to us, our next meeting, we'll look at the impact is, and
well, agreed, but that doesn't, Tom's suggestion, and I know he's just, it's nothing's set in stone or anything, but that doesn't account for anything cut from the general government budget. I think the general government budget needs to get looked at.
we can,
Are you including the capital improvement or separate?
No, at the moment, we're not. I don't think, is anyone suggesting?
No,
No, I don't think anyone's suggesting cutting the capital improvement at all at the moment.
at the moment,
And I'd like to see that not get cut if possible.
we destroy that budget every year.
I hear your concern about the ballots. I've mentioned that
More than once.
certainly more than once. However, if we were to include it in the budget and they receive that grant,
It would go to
We'd be taxing, we'd be taxing the
For no
taxpayers
reason,
in the meantime.
that is the problem, yeah.
So that's the point of us deciding what is important right now, and you don't wanna cut the education budget or the town government. We have a place right there that we know is possible gonna be grant funded.
Yeah, but.
Here's one thought,
current money's good.
now. How about the idea of placing $119,000 from reserves into the
Capital
capital non-recurring? How does everyone feel about that? Just a spitballing here.
Solve anything.
So are you saying add another?
In addition to the,
No, this is from the reserves. So in order to kind of get around the whole Ballard thing, to cut it out of the budget,
We're not paying that.
so we're not paying tax on it, but in case we don't get the grant, we have $119,000 in the capital non-reoccurring account. And best case, we get the grant, that pays for that, and hey, we have $119,000 in the capital non-reoccurring account. That's just the thought I just thought of.
so you would be adding, taking out more than $741,000 back.
Well, yeah, you would, but
Eric?
is that possible?
I think there's confusion on using money for surplus for capital. Like if you took 600,000 out of surplus and said, okay, we're gonna use it for capital. That means either you're gonna increase capital by 600, or you are gonna have a hole next year of 600.
Right.
So, I mean, with the bollards, if we got the grant and we had 600 where you're using out of surplus, we would essentially use 500,000 or 481 or whatever the bollards are. I don't know.
Here's the
So
thing,
that would just reduce the money that we're using from surplus.
no, so you're saying if we use any money from surplus whatsoever,
There's no tax implication for this.
well, I think what we would do in order to use it is just fund the capital budget with it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm just saying, if you're saying you're gonna use it for capital only,
No,
are you gonna increase the capital budget by that amount? If you are, then it's not gonna affect the cuts.
right, but I don't think anyone's suggesting. When Tom came up with that idea, I think he just meant using it in general. Am I
But if
correct?
you do use it, it does create a hole.
It does, it does. It does.
Have to make up.
Okay, so let me float this idea out there, Eric. If we wanted to use that money for capital, which would be one-time expenses, could we not between now and the end of this fiscal year, make an appropriation and be able to apply it towards those certain items that are within the capital budget right now? So then they disappear. So your
You'd have to
capital,
go to referendum.
If it's above 25,000.
Mm.
50,000.
50. So we could do one thing, but what's the point of that? I mean, it'll help a little, but we can do all this to combine, but.
If you wanted to do something like that, you'd be better off saying, adding that to the capital budget and taking that out of surplus and canceling each other out.
right.
And that's sort of what.
It's kind of what I was trying to get at, yeah, I think, right, that's,
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
One other thought, and I don't know what our final goal is for this evening. I think the next time that we meet is the public hearing. Were we trying to present a budget as close as possible to what we were,
I think, well, we're gonna have to meet, no, we're gonna have to meet again before then,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, because that,
With the agreement.
once we get those budgets back, we have to make way more,
I mean, certainly we have the ability to meet several times after the public hearing and, make more cuts, reinstate monies or do whatever. But if our goal was to try to present as close to a budget as possible to what's going to go to referendum, we're either going to need to take some action this evening, coming into public hearing or at least meeting again if we can before then.
Yeah, I think, at least in my opinion, the idea would be to send the budgets back to them and say, this is what we'd like to see. We need to meet on this day with your suggestions, and then we take it from there. But we definitely need to meet before the public hearing, because I think it would be a total disaster. We
No,
wouldn't,
we have in the past, I'm sorry, Alex.
go ahead.
No, we have in the past gone to public hearing without making any cuts, heard from them, then made cuts, then we go to town meeting. It either typically it gets voted on to go to referendum after that point. It reaches the board of
So
selectmen.
we would, there wouldn't be there wouldn't be any public input in between.
I'm not suggesting that that's what we want to do with the increases we're seeing here tonight,
Right, but we have done.
but we have done that in the past, go to public hearing without making any cuts, hear from the public. What they say, do we make cuts? Are we making cuts in the right places? Then we have meetings, discuss point, and we make those cuts.
What day is that supposed to be, Scott? I mean, Eric, I'm sorry.
Public hearing is Tuesday.
Yeah, we're never gonna meet before Tuesday.
No,
It's
so,
gonna be in the paper tomorrow.
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, that May 5th.
so here's what I suggest then. I suggest we, as a board, ask the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, this is what we would like to see. However, we will go to the public hearing with the current budgets, listen to what people have to say, and then
Have that in your back pocket.
have that in our back pocket. Then we can make decisions. I think that's the most transparent way to do it, because the public will see the current budget. They'll also see what we've suggested to do. And then you kind of combine the two in your head and say X, Y, Z, I'm in favor, I'm against.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, what is the number now?
So I believe, I think, can we all agree on the school to
600,000?
600 and 400,000? I'd like to see both scenarios if,
Oh, it was 7 and 4, I think, wasn't it? Or was it 6?
I think we moved to
I think
6.
we started at 7 and then I think we settled in at 4 and 6.
600.
We need to make a motion about that, you think?
No, they know that we're looking at that.
Okay, so we'd like to see the budget with a 600,000 decrease and a $400,000 decrease, two different.
And for,
And then,
and for general government,
We didn't get to that percentage.
We haven't gotten to that, yeah.
I think, was Eric, were you working on what that percentage was based on just the government budget, no capital?
Yeah, I got 108,532, so I don't know if you want to round it off.
I would suggest that we ask for no more than 60,000 from the general government.
How much?
108 was what percent of?
I know that's a lower percentage, but
I took the percentage that 600,000 is of the Board of Ed budget,
Okay.
what's 400?
multiply that by the general government, and it was 108,532.
So what's 400,000?
72,355.
They've been bare bones for a while. I really feel that
How about 70?
60,000 would be pretty painful.
I'm totally okay with 60,000.
Pardon me, yeah.
I don't know if I would be willing to cut them even 60,000.
I-
I am interested more just, like I said, more for illustration purposes. Give them the opportunity to speak and say, look, if you cut us by 60K, and then the other number, you cut us by 100K, this is what it's going to mean.
Right.
We're doing
Yeah,
that
it's
for
for
one,
information.
we should do it for the other.
It's just for information. It's same with the Board of Ed. It's just technically, it's just for
I'm
information.
saying we're gonna cut it by that much. I'd be curious to know where those cuts would come from.
Because even if we agree at a lower number, well, we can decipher, well, if it's 100,000, then it would be, X. So how about 60, 100,000 and $60,000 cuts, please, Dana?
Mr. Cameron, can I
Yeah.
ask Dana?
Sure.
Dana, could you put priorities? What's the first to go, second to go, third to go? So that if, for example, we eventually voted to cut the general government budget by 30,000, we sort of know what that 30,000 represents.
Sure, we can try. I would like to mention that there are some things that are not in this budget that have come about as a result of our cybersecurity assessment. So we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars there that aren't even in this budget. So the Board of Selectmen did not go back and make cuts because we really don't know where they're going to come from, but we can work on it and give you some ideas, but they will be pretty detrimental, I think.
The Board of Selectmen, we can cut that with the number that we want to, but
And
when we
line
ask,
item.
when we ask the Board of Education for the cuts, ultimately, we just give them a number.
Yes,
Yes.
They don't have to cut what they come to us and tell us they're gonna cut.
correct.
No,
They can change it and change it to whatever they wish.
Right.
Okay, just want that. Make sure we have that.
And from my scribbles in anticipation of the public hearing. You know, Tom suggested 741 from the reserves, and I know that Alex suggested $1 million.
Mhm.
Perhaps we should settle on something. I'd like to propose 850.
How does everyone feel about
Take
that?
out of the reserves.
Yeah,
Just to be clear, my proposal was just for offsetting the current budget that we're talking about. That 741 would not then be used to offset capital. It would
Right.
just be for this current budget.
Right.
Okay.
So. So let me just ask this. So 741 from surplus. If we receive, and I guess I'll use if, because I don't know how many times in the years that I've been on this board, we think something's a slam dunk, we're told something's gonna come in, we're gonna get this
Oh, yeah.
revenue, and it doesn't happen. If we receive this grant money from the senior center, we're gonna get about how much, about 700,000 back into surplus. So under that proposal, we would again luck out this next year like we did this year, and that it would be a wash. However, if we don't receive the senior center grant, in all things just kind of being equal, we could have a $741,000 fiscal cliff that we've got to deal with the following year. So our budget's going to be X plus 741,000, right?
Or you
But
tell everybody to
maybe,
come in with a 0% increase or a reduction next year. If that happens. That's why
That's
I'm,
why.
that's why
We
I'm-
have to make some decisions on cutting budgets.
exactly.
Yeah.
exactly.
Agreed.
Exactly.
Agreed.
we all agree with this.
Does the cliff, we could deal with a $200,000 cliff. I don't know whether we can deal with a $700,000 or $800,000 cliff.
That would be hard.
If the 700,000.
I don't want to paint a doomsday picture, but
No,
I just don't want to count on money that we don't have.
right,
Right.
no,
Did it last year and we got lucky. Yeah, so,
Not roll the dice too many times.
but again, then at the same time, what is,
I know.
that we have like literally millions of dollars sitting in the reserve fund that.
The maximum, if we, the maximum would be, what would it be? So take out of the fund balance to keep it at maximum?
Keep it at 17.5.
So Eric,
Is that 551? Here's 551.
Well, based on the
I know, that's the
current
issue.
proposed budget, we would be right around 17.5.
Some clarification on this. So if we didn't touch, as you're saying, Eric, I'm sorry, if we didn't touch anything at 40 million, whatever it is for this proposed budget, we would be sitting right at our max.
Projected to be,
so Eric, during the budget cycle or tail end of the budget cycle, I think it was last year, we did sit here and we had conversations about the use of the money from the general fund, and we had conversations about using that money towards one-time capital. How do we go about doing that if we've got to go to referendum every time we want to use that money for a one-time capital expenditure?
you include it in the budget. So say you wanted to use 500,000 for a fire truck. You put the fire truck in the budget, you
And you
use
appropriate
500 from
these, yeah.
surplus.
Yeah.
Put the roads in the budget and use the
And use
800
the
or a
money,
million
yeah,
towards the
for
roads.
Yeah,
Otherwise, yeah, there's a referendum down there.
But if you put it in the budget, then the taxpayers are taxed on that.
How much is current? Well, no, no, because
coming
it's
out of-
offset. So what you do is you put it in the budget, but then you fund, our revenue would be increased with the general fund money, so it offsets.
So we're not taxing on that.
No. How much money do we have in the, go ahead, Scott.
so I guess my only fear, my only concern is if we used, say, 750,000 million dollars, whatever that number is, and we offset capital, one-time capital expenditures. What happens next year?
Exactly.
Does everything that's on that schedule get accelerated? So next year we're in the exact same place that we are now? Or do we have a stay for X amount of years because we have now, paid for all of that stuff up front?
Any use of the general budget is gonna put us in that predicament.
It's
Correct.
definitely if you use it for operating budget versus
Yes.
one-time expense, definitely correct, Gary, but if you use it for one-time expense, that's when I started the conversation tonight, and I said. We can't, if we're going to do that for capital, we can't expect capital to come in at 1.506 and not cut anything else and expect for the budget next year to not be a cliff.
Right.
Yeah, so if you were to add 500,000 for the fire truck, like I said, and you took that out of surplus, that would bring you up to, say, 2 million.
Mhm.
So then next year you would take that out, it'd be back at the 1.5.
Right,
So
so
it just doesn't change
So
our
it doesn't
financial
quadruple.
position,
Yeah.
right? It just doesn't change our financial
doesn't-
position.
So how-
here.
how about,
Not if you're using it for that one time.
See, that's the way we.
Additionally.
so in order to do that, though, we'd really have to take even more out of the surplus. Because then we'd have to cover essentially next year's,
No, because you're just doing the one time.
No, I understand what you're saying. Increase it by 500, appropriate that money as part of that single purchase. But what that doesn't do is that doesn't solve our financial situation that we're trying to deal with.
yeah, because that may lower,
Correct. Correct.
As it is.
because in essence, that wouldn't cut the budget at all.
Exactly.
No, to affect the mill rate, you
Right.
have to use it.
Cut.
No, but we'd actually get our road fixed.
Well, I mean, hey,
Or we buy the fire truck,
The
or
good-
we'd get something out of
the
it.
good news is last year we funded it very healthily, so that's a good start.
Typically, we end up cutting capital to get the mill rate to where we think it needs to be.
How much money do we currently have in the capital non-recurring, do you know? There,
In the fund,
yeah,
for unassigned in the capital
Yeah.
non-recurring fund, about 118,000.
All
good one. I mean, I think we need to. Again, we don't have to do it tonight, but we need to come up with some. Ways to do this without, again, creating a cliff. There's gotta be ways, I think.
Well, we've asked the general government for their cut. We've asked the Board of Education for their cut.
Information, yep.
We haven't decided on the general fund, how much we're gonna take out of that. And we haven't cut the capital.
I don't think there's any will to cut the cap. Does anyone want to cut the capital currently?
No.
Because I don't. The thing is, we don't really have to decide on a number at the moment. I mean, we have a ballpark idea, I think, but. Those cuts and what we take out of reserves is kind of two different animals, as far as I'm concerned. Gail, did you say? I'm sorry.
I think that in all fairness, those people who will attend or listen to the public hearing. I think it's important for them to know what we're thinking about as far as what we're taking from the general fund.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that our goal is to have a 0 increase
Mhm.
in the mill rate. Otherwise, we make the decisions after the public hearing, then the
Mhm.
public hearing was on phantom budget that didn't really exist. So I think that the closer we can get to what we're thinking about, the more transparent it is to the taxpayers who would be listening to or participating in the public hearing.
So what did we come up with tentatively, 850,000, or that was Gail's suggestion? It's tough, it's tough again, because, okay, what does everyone think? I'm okay with 850,000.
I don't think it's a million, but we just gotta figure out how to do it
You're
appropriately.
okay with what?
She said she's okay with $1 million as long as we do it appropriately, and I totally agree with that sentiment, for sure.
I don't think we have to be at the top of our percentage. I
Right.
don't have a problem being at the middle or a little above the middle.
Well, the
With-
benefit, Val, for being at the top or
Is our
just
interest
under the
rate?
top is that we can't predict if we're gonna have a cliff that we're gonna need help with in a future year.
No,
And
I
if we
know.
use all of the cushion in 1 year, that's gonna put us behind the 8 ball in future years. So I don't think we should bargain ourselves down into the equidistant place within the max and the min, because I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, I don't think I wanna be at the min, but
Right.
I hate
the
to have
middle's
this
not bad.
big.
We're still pretty, even $1 million, we're still pretty high up there.
Still healthy.
So assuming that we can figure out a way to be able to utilize that. So you don't
Right,
have this cliff.
right.
I guess my question for, kind of for everybody on the board is, how high are you willing to go to balance the budget with that money? Taking into consideration that we had discussed utilizing $500,000 to $600,000 to pay down the bond for the field, when it comes time to get it bonded. So is everybody still, I guess, kind of on board with not bonding the full amount, but using some of our surplus to offset that, so we're not paying it on the interest on the full amount?
Yeah, so if we don't take the 600 or 700, then we still can take more out for the bond.
Right, so I guess what's everybody's ceiling for this budget based on us using it for that? Right.
Yeah, that's a good idea. No. that's better.
I love that idea, no doubt, but my priority number one, in my opinion, is to balance the budget. That is my priority. And
Well, I think we'll be pretty close balance if we make some cuts.
I agree. I think we're on our way. We're on our way, but I think,
I still think Tom's idea is good, 741 and 600, and see what the Board of Education comes down with. And ask for that, so we get to the 0 increase.
that's, Dan, what do you think then?
Yeah, I like Tom's idea, the 741 and 600, but I do want to hear from the government budget, because if we don't have to cut the 600 completely from Board of Ed, and they come up with some ideas, maybe it doesn't have to be 600, maybe it's 500 and 100, maybe it's 550 and 50.
Okay, so the number we asked for the general fund was 30
It's 60 or 100.
60 and 100.
and 100.
Mm. Right.
But all those numbers combined will be not available.
It would get us to
It would get us, yeah.
It'll get us close.
Yeah,
Less than that.
No.
well, we're rounding and such, but I think the idea is we're trying to get to 0. So if we're off a little, maybe we have to take 50,000 more, 25,000 more from the reserve, so be it, but we're trying to get a starting point
And
to,
I think if we can get to 0, this budget will pass and we won't have to be going to a second referendum and
Right.
well, there's no doubt
worry
about
about
that.
cutting even more.
Yeah,
But to comment on the first selectwoman's comment, there has been a lot of cyber attacks on town halls, general servers, and on the land records. Very dangerous and very expensive results if we don't have good cybersecurity. So if that's something that isn't in the budget that needs to be considered, I would sort of ask the first selectman if she could bring to the table what her concerns are and what she thinks they're gonna cost.
And a quick question, is that something that can be added later? As long as
Only
it's
by
under 50,
referendum.
only if it's under 50,000, if it's under 50,000, though, is that something we
How
can
much-
take out of surplus to do?
So we thinking that's gonna be, do we have an idea?
Dana, do you have an idea?
I don't remember all the numbers and I think I would say 25 to 30, off the top of my head.
And that's not unreasonable. We've gone through that where I work, and that's actually kind
That's
of low. It's
Uh-huh.
actually kind of low. I can tell you from experience, it's cost us considerably more to prepare for.
Because think about if they wipe out the land records.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
my
no,
God.
but I'm just saying, is that something we could take out of the surplus after the fact, as long as it's under 50,000?
Up to 20, you guys.
Oh,
can
it's 20.
appropriate. 20 is town meeting, 50 is
No,
referendum.
but we're thinking, what, wouldn't that be a capital item?
It could be considered, depending on what it
Maybe
is.
we could add it to the.
That's what I was
capital budget.
thinking. yeah.
Except it's different parts, unless we can put all those parts together, it's different systems that are 5,000 here.
But
12,000
depending on
here.
what it is, you could use the unassigned capital,
Okay.
non-recurring funds.
Because other towns have gotten whacked locally.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's the last thing we need, man,
It's been tremendously expensive.
yeah.
So just, I guess, just a more of a general comment. Kind of my tunnel vision way of thinking. In response to, I guess, Dan had said about hearing from town government. As a possible offset on the cut, I personally, I like Tom's idea. I would like to stay steadfast, me personally, of 600 grand from the Board of Ed, assuming everything lines up. If we make additional cuts, then they're additional on top of that, 600,000. Whether it be joint government or whether it be, if we decided to go into capital or whatnot, that would be on top of that. And whether we stay at that still, that well, we would stay at that 741 number, obviously that number would go down.
Do you need any kind of votes from us today in order to go to public hearing?
Well, no, I don't.
We just need to have an accurate number for the board and the general. For them to come back with.
Well, I think the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed are all set as far as we're concerned. We gave them their marching orders, so to speak, but I think the only number we've come up to now is the reserve amount. I mean, why don't we say 750,000 tentative on
I'll make that motion.
on all the other factors, Is everyone okay with that for now?
You
Yeah,
can
I'm
always
okay.
change it.
I'm okay with that number. I'm just concerned where what we're gonna offset with it. I just don't like offsetting operational expenses with undesignated fund balance.
I understand.
It's gonna bite you in the butt.
Oh, yeah, I think we can come up with ways to spend it. There's gotta be ways to spend it. Okay,
I made that motion. Okay, so somebody wants to second it? Or-
do we need a
I
motion?
don't think we need a
I don't
motion.
think we need a motion. I think we're just kind of agreeing to it. Does everyone?
So that puts a mill rate at a 0.65 mill increase.
With no other cuts.
Right.
Just with the 741.
With the 7 together.
Yeah. With no cuts, so. Okay, could you remind us, schedule, Eric, while we're here?
Public hearing is May 2nd at the middle school cafeteria. And then you guys have another work session scheduled for Thursday, May 4th.
Excellent,
Do
that'll
you have
be,
a place for that yet?
I believe that's here. Let me check the schedule.
That's 5-2.
Yes, 5-2 public hearing, 5-4 is our next work session.
That is the work session. Okay.
next Tuesday here.
Yep.
No, next Tuesday.
No, next Tuesday's at the middle school,
Middle school.
Public
Yeah.
hearing.
What time is it?
7 p.m. Same with
Yeah, and we'll be here on the fourth.
Thursday the fourth. Town hall.
bring your dinner and everything else on the fourth. Okay.
I think we have to schedule another meeting after that week.
We'll figure it out. Do we have anything scheduled at all? We don't have,
No, nothing scheduled. The fourth is the last
okay,
one that you got.
Tentatively said town meeting potentially May 23rd, so, right?
the 23rd, yeah, okay,
Town meeting, the selectmen's meeting,
potentially.
potentially. They hit a referendum for June 2nd, that was.
Okay. The agenda. Item number 3, adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Right.
All right, motion to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Referendum.
Okay, no worries.
Back on the third, so.
Sports are really important. Sounds good. Great.
What we just did.
Started.